So guys, we're looking back on 2024, right? A lot of things happened. A lot of things happened in your business personally, I know. Some highlights from this past year, guys. What do you think, Robert or Jeff?
I think one of my highlights, I really didn't realize how much our economy depended on the housing market. This last year, it just, with the housing market not moving, it just created in the whole economy, let alone in our the equipment rental business, but the effect that it had on our economy surprised me. I didn't know it was that strong with houses not moving. So once things start to move again, I'm hoping that it'll change. But it just shocked me how much it affected our economy.
Yeah. Jeff, thoughts?
I mean, I think personally in our business, as well as I think our industry as a whole, is the resiliency of my business and of our members. There's countless stories of people with difficult circumstances and things like that, and being able as a team to get through it and come out on the other side stronger than you went into, and get through stuff you never thought you could. You never thought you could get through, or certainly wouldn't want to go through.
Yeah, I mean, when you're looking back on some of the years, some years it seems like certain segments perform better than others, whether it's on the event side or on the equipment side. Sometimes both segments prosper. I know for us personally as well, similar to you, Robert, is obviously a lot of uncertainty around the election, right? So people are talking about, well, I'm not really sure, I'm going to pump the brakes, we'll just kind of wait. For us, it was really odd when you look at the first quarter of this year. Strong first quarter, best first quarter we've probably ever had in our history, 35 years. And then the summer was just kind of stagnant for us, really, quite honestly. It was pretty flat. I don't know whether it was the housing market, obviously higher interest rates, the election uncertainty, but it was just kind of stagnant. And now this fourth quarter has just taken off again. So overall, I think the year will be good for us, but it was uneven for us. And usually, in our business, we like certainty. You like to know what the next year will look like, what the next quarter will look like, what today will look like. And we really didn't have that in our market. So that was probably the recap for me for 2024. It was just that uncertainty throughout the year. Little folks, looking at the election, looking at rates. I think people are going to be able to take a breath now as we look forward and kind of move.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it is the uncertainty too. I mean, I think we've been talking about a downturn or a recession, or whatever term you want to use, for I feel like 18 months. And it never really materialized. It certainly flattened out, because we went through 2 years or 3 years of craziness, but it never. And now I think it's everybody slowed spending down and things like that. Even rental companies slowed spending down. And now that it seems like, okay, maybe we're not going to have one, we can go and spend again,
right,
with our clients and ourselves.
Sure.
What do you think 2025 is going to bring?
Yeah, so that's the thing that we've heard quite a bit. As you look from the manufacturer standpoint, we all know, 18 months ago, there was this huge ramp up of production because lead times were significant, demand was huge. So we looked at capacity was growing. And now we're in a situation where we've heard, some manufacturers laying off folks. We've seen availability of equipment is certainly, lead times have come down quite a bit. And so when you look forward into 2025, at least from an operator standpoint, and the ability for us to get equipment, to get it at either extended terms or discounted rates. If you're in a position to buy, I think we're in a really good market. It's certainly a buyer's market, more so than we've seen probably in 3 years. So when we look forward to 2025, I think in terms of our ability to add equipment, I think we're in a good position. When you look at our market and who we're serving, I think the market will still be a little uneven, to be quite honest with you. I think 2025 there'll be a little uncertainty. Obviously, when you've got certain policies that are being passed down from Congress, we know there's a lot of tax issues on the table, so that impacts investment. I'm curious if the housing market will come back in 25. Rates have began to moderate and come down a little bit on that front, but I think quite honestly, personally, I think 2025 will still be a little uneven. There's going to be a lot of excitement early. People are thinking, all this free money is becoming available again. We're going to go back to the glory days, but I'm not sure it's going to happen right away.
Yeah, I kind of agree. I think I'm looking more towards the second quarter of 2026 to really see a turnaround in our economy. I think it's going to be a little unsteady going forward, but with the extension of the tax credits that you mentioned that I think is going to happen, that they were due to expire in 2025, I think it's going to really create a little more excitement towards the purchasing of equipment for the smaller businesses, because there'll be a little more continuity. They'll know what's happening, what's coming down the pipe, instead of this uncertainty that we've been facing coming up to 2025, going, oh my God, all these tax credits that we've been using since 2017 are all going to stop.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to plan for that. Now, like you said, with the Congress changing, those are probably going to be extended out, past 2025, and that's going to I think it's going to make a big difference for small business.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the companies, to your point with the buying equipment, I think the companies that are poised for growth, it's a great opportunity for those companies to, take a larger chunk out of the market. Between the M&A activity, which is, eliminated, the bigger guys buying the smaller guys, it's left the spot in the middle, I think, for companies that are trying to, raise, go from 5 million to 10 million or whatever the case is. I think there's really an opportunity for those companies to push forward and pick up some of the, the void in the market, if you will.
Right. Speaking of M&A, I was thinking that as we were coming in for preparation for today, is we saw a lot of activity, a lot of 8-10 store chains being acquired. Obviously, all of the larger players, United, Sunbelt, Herc, have all been extremely active. Do you foresee that same type of activity? Because it seems to have paused a little bit, right? There's some rumblings out there, but it was pretty hot and heavy. It seemed like every other week we'd get some announcement that somebody was buying somebody else. Do you foresee that happening in 25 or perhaps the first part of 26? Or do you think those larger players are also kind of stepping back and kind of just taking those acquisitions that they've made and integrating them, making sure that they're on the same, playing out the same playbook? Do you think those will moderate as well?
Some of it seems like, obviously being on the event side, so you're not as in tune with it, but just from the outside, it feels like it's like an arms race. Like you hear stories where they're trying to acquire one and they can't get the deal done because somebody else comes in, and they immediately pivot to, one that's adjacent, in the adjacent area and acquire that. And it just seems like it's just like who can get to, X billion, and just, it seems like it's just they're chasing it, and they'll acquire one and then make reductions in staff at the same time. It doesn't make a lot of sense. But again, it's just trying to, like acquiring that territory on the board, so to speak.
Yeah.
And so I think as long as one of them is continuing to joist for position, the other one's going to be doing the same thing, or the other ones are going to be doing the same thing.
Yeah. Talk about on the event side. Obviously, throughout the history on the event side, there have been players that have tried to consolidate and get big, and some of those have not obviously played out over the years. There's some smaller activity that's happened. Do you foresee that happening where there's ever the type of consolidation that we're seeing on the equipment side? Do you see that ever happening on the event side?
I mean, not to the same kind of numbers. I mean, I think that, in our world, some of the companies are getting to a point, they're, $250 million is enormous on our side. And I think you're getting companies that are getting in that range, and it's really difficult. I mean, you say most, it's almost every one of those has failed eventually.
Right.
And I think it's really, really difficult on our side to get, to be a real nationwide player and have extended success. I mean, you can buy and cut costs and things like that. But I think long term, it's very difficult to ever get anywhere. I don't think you'll see a party rental company doing.
Yeah. Just out of curiosity, having your perspective, Jeff, you're in tune with the market. So why is that? Why do you think some of those consolidations have happened, acquisitions that have happened, and you're moving from Jacksonville to Southeast region or a larger operation? Why do you think they have not been able to scale up to the point where they've been successful? Why have they failed?
I think it's the only thing being a single store operator and seeing, I realize that the business is better when I'm involved. Like I can save us 10% or 15% or whatever around the on the barges being there and avoiding potholes and things like that. So that's the only thing I can think of is that a store manager is never going to care as much as I care or as a single store operator cares. It just is. It's so labor intensive and all the other stuff. You see some of the private equity companies, they're store managers or branch managers or something. It's just a different dynamic than a guy who's lives and breathes his business.
Yeah. So as both of you are looking forward to the next year, what are some of those either challenges or opportunities you're seeing going forward for the next, let's say, 12, 18 months?
Oh, some of the opportunities, like you mentioned earlier, is definitely the interest rates coming down. So there's going to be, the ability to purchase, equipment and to expand. And I see still some merger and acquisition stuff happening in the future, not necessarily by a couple of the bigger players, but by some of the smaller players that are trying to make themselves a little bit larger.
Okay.
So you'll see companies that have, say 5 or 6 locations, purchasing up a couple more locations, becoming, 12, 14 locations. Some that are maybe a single are going to have 2. So I see a lot of that coming down the pipe. So your single store operators are going to go, hey, it's time. I got the money's available. Hopefully labor will become available. That's a big hope.
Yeah.
So I see some of those expanding. That smaller group expanding beyond the single store into their second or third location. So
Okay.
I think there's a lot of opportunities out there they're going to pop up in the next couple of years.
How about challenges over the next 12 months or so? Is labor still an issue? Is the cost of money is coming down a little bit, but it's still not cheap money.
Yeah.
Although we did talk about the manufacturers are, subsidizing a lot of the acquisition costs, but
I think labor.
Labor is still the biggest one.
Still the biggest one. The price of labor has gone up tremendously now with the minimum wage going to almost a living wage is what they're trying to shoot for.
And you're in California, Robert.
I'm in California, yeah. So it's really high in our area.
Yeah.
So, but the availability of labor has been a challenge, and I don't know how we're going to overcome that. I really don't.
So are people just not entering the workforce, or are there other opportunities that are better than a tool shed? Or what's the issue? Where we're at and where we think we need to be full employment for our businesses? What's the roadblock?
I think it's the gig work stuff. People that can drive Uber and all those sort of things. There's so many more things they can do rather than install tents or work on equipment or whatever the case is. And to Robert's point, we've been able to find it, but you're definitely having to pay more for it, and the extra benefits and extra things you have to do for them, keep them engaged. That's the challenge.
Yeah, I had a conversation the other day with somebody, and we were talking about the 5-day work week, and that's almost a non-starter for folks when you tell them you have to work 5 days. It's like 4 is like the max, and to your point, people wanted the opportunity to, hey, can I work today and then take a couple days, kind of plug and play, make enough money to support whatever interests I have, and that idea of I'm putting in 40, 50, 60 hours a week, I don't know if that's ever coming back.
No, and when you get somebody on your team that's willing to do it, you put your arms around them, show them all the love you can show, because you're probably not going to find a replacement. And I say to our team all the time, you have somebody that comes to work every day and has a good attitude. It may not be the fastest worker, the highest performer. That's a lot of boxes they're checking.
Yeah. Good. Any other thoughts, comments, reflections as we're kind of rolling forward here?
No, I'm kind of curious. You watch different metrics in the event rental business than you do. So what kind of metrics do you watch on a daily or weekly basis?
Internally, one of the things we look at, because in the downturns we've seen in the past, when you're on the event side, particularly with us, we do a lot of weddings and things like that, life events. People are still going to get married when there's a downturn, but they just do it smaller.
Mhm.
So one of the things we look at is average ticket cost, and really we want that to be constantly and ideally constantly going up. But when it starts going down is when you have to start paying attention, because that means people are starting to pull back a little bit.
Yeah.
You know, they're not doing a tent, or they're not doing a tent liner in a tent, or whatever the case is, or cutting down on the decor. So those things we look at a lot is the average ticket, because for us, constantly adding inventory, it should really be, again, trending up and prices are moving up. So if it starts to flatten out or turn down, then that's when people are.
Yeah, good point.
How about you? What do you guys watch on that?
Yeah, so average ticket actually is something that the last 5 years, we've really been paying attention to. Number of tickets, average tickets, and so we've seen the number of tickets diminish a little bit. Average ticket has been going up, costs have been going up, labor costs, acquisition costs, but we're certainly looking at utilization numbers as well, right? Whether it's time or dollar utilization. So if we're looking at an asset and we're putting that asset out there and we're saying, okay, in the course of a week, if a weekly rate is $1,000 and we're getting $600 off that week, we've got a 60% dollar utilization on that asset. So we're measuring all of our equipment based on that. If it's above the threshold, there's some things you can do to either, add inventory. If it's below the threshold, then you got to ask the question, do we need to lower the price or do we need to get out of that market? And so those are things that we're constant. Our leadership team looks at weekly. Yep.
Yeah. We do similar things. We also look at the overdue contracts. So anything that's like overdue, over 7 days, not being touched or by somebody else, we take a look at it and say, hey, what's going on with this? There should be some kind of a contact within 7 days.
You mean overdue, like the piece of equipment still out on rent?
Still out on rent.
Sure.
So it's
okay.
overdue.
Yeah.
So because at that point, at 7 days, a week, we've been running into some theft issues.
Yeah.
So at that point, if they haven't been contacted and it was supposed to have been due, by the first day, well, within 7 days, something's going on. So it's one of the things that we started really looking at because of the current theft problems that we've been having, in our state, in our industry, actually.
It's probably one of the single biggest issues that our members have is the issue around theft, and whether it's theft by conversion or just stealing right off your lot. So it's something we have to be mindful about. Yeah. And the equipment's expensive, and they can flip it and make money quickly. So yeah.
You guys are in those Facebook groups. I see them. It feels like every day there's a post by somebody that this person did this in this part of this state, and their information. And it seems like it's, again, from the outside, it seems like it's a alert counter person is what is the best asset you can have. Turning that person away and realizing, okay, something's not right here. Otherwise, it's too late.
I was actually in a conversation a couple of weeks ago with Buddy Stubbs, and he resorted, it's probably been a decade at least. He said, any new customer that walks in the door, they're fingerprinting them. I thought, well, that's a unique approach, I guess. If the guy says, I'm not giving you my fingerprint for all kinds of reasons, some legitimate, you're like, okay, well, if you don't want to you don't want to take your thumbprint and put it on the contract, and maybe you should rent from us. I thought, well, that eliminates the whole fake ID and fake credit card and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But anyway, all right. Well, gentlemen, appreciate the conversation. Yeah, enjoy the rest of 2024, and here's hoping all of us in 2025 have a great year.
Yeah, absolutely.
You bet.
All right.